The Oak and Finch restaurant shimmered under soft chandeliers, its polished wooden floors whispering elegance with every footstep. Servers moved in fluid harmony, their movements rehearsed but genuine. The clink of crystal, the murmur of conversation, and the occasional burst of laughter filled the space with the comfort of fine dining. Nia Jefferson floated through it all with quiet precision. Her dark hair was tied in a neat bun, and her uniform was perfectly pressed. Every gesture, pouring water, adjusting silverware, greeting guests, was done with care and pride. Her smile was warm, but not performative. It reached her eyes, even after hours on her feet. She greeted the Williams party at table 9 with ease, remembered that Mr. Lewis at table 6 preferred no ice in his tea, and discreetly passed a tissue to the young girl who had spilled a bit of sauce on her dress. Nia made her way through the dining room like a steady breeze, unnoticed unless you needed her, then unforgettable. Darren, the floor manager, gave her a quick thumbs up from the bar. They had worked together for nearly 5 years, and he knew she could handle almost anything. Nia didn't crave attention, but she commanded respect simply by the way she carried herself. It was a typical Tuesday night, until a new reservation was seated at table 12. Preston Hale entered the restaurant with Monica at his side. He wore a deep navy suit that probably cost more than most people's rent, and a look of mild irritation as if luxury itself owed him something. Monica, elegant and quiet, followed his lead with practiced patience. Darren guided them to their seats, gestured for Nia, and made a quick note in the reservation system. No allergies. Requested window seat. Preferred low noise. Table 12's yours, he said as Nia passed by. Looks like a quiet couple. Nia nodded, wiping her hands on her apron before glancing toward the table. Monica offered a small smile. Preston didn't look up from his phone. She made a mental note to offer the chef special and confirm Monica's wine choice, then continued on to finish helping another guest. She had no idea the air would soon thicken with tension, nor that this particular man's presence would shift the entire mood of the evening. All around her, glasses sparkled and conversations hummed. But in a few short minutes, the air at table 12 would start to hum with something else entirely. Preston Hale sat with his elbows on the table, jaw clenched. The room was pleasant, the lighting just dim enough to be sophisticated, and the jazz trio in the corner played soft notes that most guests found soothing. But Preston noticed none of it. He stared at his watch, then scanned the room with impatient eyes. His gaze locked onto Nia as she delivered a dessert menu to another table. She smiled and leaned slightly toward an older couple, answering a question with grace. Preston's lip curled. Monica gently touched his arm. It's only been a few minutes. Preston didn't reply. He simply kept watching Nia. The way she laughed politely. The way her hands moved, precise and controlled. It annoyed him. Not because she was slow. She wasn't. But because she didn't seem to notice him. Not the suit. Not the name. Not the presence he had always assumed commanded instant attention. He shifted in his seat. His world was built on recognition. CEOs knew him. Banks called him before he called them. People moved faster around him, spoke softer, and never made him wait. But here, in this polished restaurant, he was just another man in a booth. And Nia Jefferson hadn't looked his way once. I'll get her attention, Monica offered gently. No, he said sharply. She sees us. She's choosing to ignore us. Monica blinked. I really don't think that's. She looked directly at me when we came in. He cut her off. And she hasn't even brought us menus. Preston crossed his arms, a sour expression settling into his features. Monica said nothing more. She glanced around, noticing how the other guests didn't seem to share Preston's discomfort. No one else looked neglected. It was just him. He began tapping his finger on the table, a steady, pointed rhythm that grew louder with each passing second. Monica sipped her water, suddenly very aware of the tension building in their small corner of the room. Nia, across the room, finished assisting a party of 5 with a wine selection. She made a note on her pad, then finally turned toward table 12. Her face was neutral, composed. She started toward them with the same unhurried confidence she gave every guest. But to Preston, her pace was a provocation. In his world, people rushed to serve him. They apologized. They flattered. They bent themselves out of shape to make his experience easier. And here she was, walking like he was no one special. By the time Nia reached their table, something behind Preston's eyes had shifted. The man who had walked in with mild irritation now simmered with something darker. Not rage, not yet, but insult. The kind born not from true offense, but from ego denied. He straightened his jacket and prepared himself. In his mind, this was no longer just dinner. It was a matter of pride. Nia arrived at the table with a calm smile. Her pad rested lightly in her left hand. "Good evening. Thank you for your patience. May I offer you something to drink to start?" Preston didn't smile. He didn't look at the menu. He tilted his head slightly, voice cool. "Was I invisible this entire time?" The question hung in the air, deceptively casual. Monica looked up sharply, eyes darting between them. Nia blinked once, then kept her voice steady. "Not at all, sir. We've been managing several new walk-ins. I appreciate your understanding." Preston gave a short laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Understanding, right?" He glanced at Monica. "Imagine if I showed up to a meeting 10 minutes late and said thanks for understanding. I'd lose $500 million. Nia nodded, her smile unshaken. "Would you like still or sparkling water?" "You think I'm talking about water?" he replied, then sat back and folded his arms. "It's about respect. Something that seems to be rationed here." Monica cleared her throat. "Preston." "No," he said, eyes still on Nia. "I'm just wondering how often this happens. Certain people getting more attention than others." Nia stood straight, maintaining eye contact. "I give every table the same level of service. I'll let you both take a moment with the menu, and I'll be right back." She turned gently and walked away without rushing. Her stride was smooth, her head high. Preston watched her go, a twitch in his jaw. Monica leaned in, her voice quiet but firm. "You're reading too much into this." "No," he said again. "I'm not. This is exactly what happens when people forget who I am." He didn't say it loudly, but the tone was unmistakable, wounded pride disguised as analysis. Monica sighed and looked down at her menu, hoping the moment would pass. But it didn't. Across the room, Nia stopped by a hostess and handed her the pad. She whispered something brief and walked into the back. Not flustered, not hiding. Just moving with the same rhythm she always had. Controlled. Composed. The hostess returned with fresh menus for table 12. "Let me know when you're ready," she said politely, placing them down. Preston didn't respond. He simply opened the menu with one hand, his other drumming his fingertips against the linen tablecloth. Monica noticed how tight his jaw remained. Minutes passed. Nia returned with a notepad in hand, stopping at a table beside theirs first to confirm an order. She didn't make eye contact with Preston. She focused on her work. It was not the reaction Preston expected. He had delivered a challenge, and it had not been met with apology or fear. Only professionalism, distance. When Nia turned back to them, her voice was as calm as ever. "Have you decided on a drink? Or would you like another moment?" Preston gave her a hard stare. "I'll have the Pinot, and I hope the service improves from here." Nia nodded, then turned to Monica. "For you." Monica hesitated, then answered softly, "I'll have the same, please." Nia gave a small nod and stepped away. Preston didn't speak again for a while. He watched her move, trying to read something beneath her smooth exterior. But all he saw was someone who refused to play the part he'd expected. Dinner moved forward, but the tension did not ease. Preston barely glanced at the menu. When Nia returned with the wine, he didn't thank her. He didn't even look up. She poured steadily, placing the bottle on the edge of the table with care. "Would you like to place your order now?" "I suppose we should, before someone else gets promoted ahead of us," Preston muttered, his voice just loud enough to carry. Nia stayed composed. "Of course. I'll take the dry-aged ribeye," he said. "Medium rare. But please do me a favor. Make sure it doesn't take another 30 minutes. I know how time can get away from people. Monica stiffened in her seat. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. And for you? Nia turned politely to her. The halibut, please. With the garlic broccolini. Nia gave a brief nod. Excellent choices. I'll put that in right away. Preston sipped his wine and leaned back. You know, it's interesting. You've got that calm, quiet type of professionalism. Very expected. Nia paused for half a breath before continuing to the kitchen. His tone wasn't just arrogant anymore. It had shifted. Thinly veiled condescension wrapped in a smile. At table 11, an older couple looked over. The man furrowed his brow. As the entrees were being prepared, Preston's commentary continued. He spoke in hushed tones but with sharp edges, never quite crossing a blatant line, yet always pressing one. I bet you've seen a lot in this job, he said, swirling his glass. Must be hard to move up though, right? All that ambition. Hitting ceilings. Nia placed fresh napkins gently beside their plates. I'm quite content with my role. I'm sure you are, he replied, lips curling slightly. Some people know their place and stay in it. There's peace in that. Monica looked directly at him now, clearly disturbed. Preston. What? He said without turning to her. Just making conversation. Nia said nothing. She stepped back quietly, giving them space. At the host's stand, another server, Jamal, whispered to Darren, the manager. Darren's brows knit as he scanned the room and found Nia. She didn't signal distress. Her posture remained upright. But something in her stillness conveyed that she was drawing from deep resolve. Nearby guests began to notice too. Table 9 had fallen silent. Table 14 kept glancing over, listening with tightened jaws. The ribeye and halibut were plated and ready. Nia approached the kitchen, collected the dishes, and brought them to the table with steady hands. Preston didn't thank her. Instead, he eyed the plate and quipped, "You do know how to carry a steak. I'll give you that." Nia placed the plate without flinching. "Enjoy your meal." Then she stepped away again, grace intact, unshaken. But the room was shifting. People weren't eating. They were watching, listening, and Nia knew it. The dinner continued, but the atmosphere had thickened, charged like the calm before a storm. Preston's voice grew sharper, his words cutting deeper. "I have to say," he said, leaning forward, eyes fixed on Nia, "it's impressive how you managed to smile through all of this." Nia met his gaze steadily. "I believe in treating everyone with respect." He smirked. "Respect, huh? That's a luxury for some. Not everyone earns it." Monica shifted uncomfortably beside him but stayed silent. Preston lowered his voice, but his words pierced the quiet. "I wonder if you understand how this world works. How people like me get ahead while others stay where they are." Nia's jaw tightened, but she held her calm. "You think because of my skin, my place is predetermined," Preston said, his tone a cruel whisper. "That I'm supposed to expect less." There was a pause so deep it echoed. Nia took a breath, stood tall, and spoke with quiet authority. "You must be exhausted carrying that much hate into every room." The words hung in the air, weighty and undeniable. The restaurant fell silent. Forks stopped moving midair. Conversations died out. Monica's face flushed. She glanced away from Preston, ashamed. Patrons nearby exchanged looks, shocked by the sudden stillness. Nia's words weren't loud, but they rang louder than any shout. The moment stretched, filled with unspoken truths and simmering tension. Darren, watching from across the room, straightened. The balance had shifted. The heavy silence that followed Nia's words spread like wildfire through the Oak and Finch dining room. Time seemed to slow as every person present absorbed the gravity of what had just been said. The clinking of silverware, the hum of background chatter, all of it ceased abruptly. Even the soft jazz playing over the speakers seemed to pause, as if the whole world was holding its breath. Preston sat frozen, his face betraying a flicker of shock and something darker. The bitter sting of being called out. His eyes darted around, desperate to find an ally in the room. but the gazes he met were anything but friendly. Nearby diners who had once looked away or dismissed his attitude were now watching with quiet approval of Nia's composure. Monica, perched beside Preston, shifted awkwardly in her seat. Her earlier efforts to smooth over Preston's growing agitation vanished completely as embarrassment flushed her cheeks. She looked down at her napkin, unwilling to meet anyone's eyes. She murmured something to Preston, but he barely acknowledged her. His pride, so carefully guarded, had taken a hit. Nia, meanwhile, remained calm, her posture relaxed, but her eyes held a quiet fire that spoke volumes without needing another word. The dignity she carried was a shield against the ugliness of the moment, and it was unyielding. The other servers exchanged glances, their respect for Nia growing in that suspended moment. They could feel the weight of what had just happened, a simple but powerful act of courage. Darren, the manager, appeared from the kitchen with purposeful steps. His gaze swept the room, quickly assessing the shift in energy. Approaching Nia first, he gave her a brief nod of support, then turned to Preston, who was still reeling. The murmur of whispered conversations began to rise again, but the tone had changed. This was no longer just another night at a high-end restaurant. It was a turning point. Darren cleared his throat loudly, commanding attention. "Sir, I need to speak with you for a moment," he said evenly, his voice steady and authoritative. Preston hesitated, caught between anger and confusion. He rose slowly, glancing at Monica, who now looked more like a stranger than a companion. As they stepped toward a quieter corner, Nia felt the eyes of the entire room still on her. Her heart pounded, but she held her ground, knowing the power of silence could be louder than any argument. Outside their small gathering, whispers began to spread. Diners who had been silent moments before were now quietly sharing their impressions of what had just transpired. Some shook their heads in disbelief at Preston's attitude. Others whispered words of admiration for Nia's calm strength. Monica's face remained downcast as she waited for Preston, who now faced something far greater than an irritated customer's impatience. He was confronting the consequence of arrogance and bigotry in a place that would not tolerate it. Inside, Nia took a deep breath and prepared herself for what was next. Standing tall was only the beginning of the night's true challenge. Darren's eyes met Preston's with unwavering resolve. The atmosphere was thick with tension as the other diners watched, sensing a confrontation was about to unfold, but this was not the usual kind. Darren's voice was calm but firm as he addressed Preston. "Sir, Oak and Finch prides itself on respect and dignity for every guest and staff member." Darren began, his gaze steady. "Bigotry, whether subtle or overt, has no place here." Preston's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to protest, but Darren raised a hand to pause him. "You have two choices tonight," Darren continued. "You can change your tone and treat our staff with respect, or you can leave and take your attitude with you." The words hung in the air, clear and uncompromising. Preston's eyes flicked to Monica, who looked uneasy but silent. He glanced around, seeing the quiet disapproval from the guests and the subtle nods of encouragement from the staff. For the first time, the power of his wealth and status felt diminished, replaced by an uncomfortable truth. Money did not buy respect. "Is that clear?" Darren asked, his voice not raising but cutting through the room with sharp precision. Preston's lips pressed into a thin line. His face betrayed a flicker of anger mixed with humiliation. He straightened, but there was no fire in his eyes, only the cold recognition that tonight, he was no longer the one in control. He took a step back, nodding curtly. Without another word, he turned and started toward the exit. Monica hesitated, then followed, casting a quick glance toward Nia that held a mixture of regret and admiration. As the door closed behind them, a collective breath seemed to release throughout Oak and Finch. The room slowly returned to its rhythm. The clatter of cutlery resumed, conversations picked up, but the energy was transformed. Nia stood quietly, her expression unreadable. Darren approached her with a reassuring smile and a firm hand on her shoulder. "You handled that with incredible grace," he said. "We've got your back always." Her co-workers gathered around, offering smiles and subtle nods of support. The moment had changed more than just the evening's atmosphere. It had shifted the unspoken dynamics of the entire restaurant. Monica's words lingered in the air long after she had left. "I wish more people were like you." Nia returned to her duties, steady and composed, carrying a newfound strength that would quietly ripple far beyond this night. Preston Hale's retreat was anything but graceful. The cool air outside the Oak and Finch entrance hit his face, but it did little to wash away the sting of being confronted. Not by a competitor, not by a rival, but by a woman he had underestimated from the start. The echoes of Darren's firm words replayed in his mind. "Bigotry has no place here." The phrase struck deeper than any insult he had thrown. As he walked down the polished steps, Preston's thoughts churned. His identity was built on control, on power, and on the assumption that his wealth commanded respect everywhere. Tonight, that illusion was shattered. Monica's silence beside him was a stark contrast to the usual conversations he dominated. She glanced his way once, her eyes filled with something unfamiliar: disappointment. Preston's ego, once a towering fortress, now felt exposed and vulnerable. He realized that in this place, this restaurant where elegance met dignity, his money was meaningless. His bitterness surfaced as a low mutter, barely audible. "I don't need this," he said, more to himself than to Monica. Monica slowed, then stopped. "Maybe this is exactly what you need," she said quietly. The words hit him harder than any public rebuke. She stepped away from him, disappearing into the night, leaving Preston to face the consequences of his actions alone. The bustling city noise carried on around him, indifferent to his turmoil. Back inside, the atmosphere was healing. Diners exchanged relieved smiles, and the staff resumed their work with renewed confidence. The incident had become a silent lesson, not just about standing up to injustice, but about the power of quiet dignity. Nia returned to her duties with a calm that now felt unshakable. Her words, her strength, had created a ripple effect that would be felt long after Preston's shadow disappeared from Oak and Finch. Tonight, the restaurant had witnessed more than a confrontation. It had witnessed a moment of truth, a revelation that respect is earned, not bought. The soft hum of the Oak and Finch kitchen mingled with the low murmur of resumed conversations. Nia Jefferson stood quietly by the service station, her composure steady despite the lingering tension that still hung in the air like a faint mist. Darren approached her, his face warm with genuine respect. "Nia," he said softly, "I want to thank you. You handled that situation with more grace and strength than I could have expected." His eyes scanned the room as if confirming the peace restored among the guests. "We've got your back always." Nia nodded, a small smile touching her lips. The affirmation from Darren was a quiet victory, a shield that allowed her to keep walking tall. Around her, co-workers began to gather, their eyes reflecting admiration. Some gave her subtle nods, others whispered words of encouragement. In a place where respect was often earned through years of hard work, Nia's courage had instantly earned hers. Monica, the woman who had accompanied Preston, approached Nia just before leaving. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I wish more people were like you," she said, eyes downcast. "You showed me something tonight that I didn't want to see." Nia accepted the words without bitterness. There was no need for confrontation, only understanding. Monica's departure was quiet, but it marked a shift, not only in the restaurant's atmosphere but perhaps in Monica herself. As the night deepened, Nia returned to her role, moving among the tables with a renewed sense of purpose. The evening had tested her, but more importantly, it had revealed the power that comes from standing firm in one's dignity. In the world outside the elegant walls of Oak and Finch, challenges would come again. But tonight was a reminder that grace, paired with quiet courage, could win even the hardest battles. The night at Oak and Finch settled into a peaceful rhythm once more. The clinking of glasses, soft laughter, and polite chatter filled the air again. But beneath the normalcy, something had shifted. Nia Jefferson moved through the dining room with steady steps, her presence calm but unmistakably powerful. She had become more than just a server tonight. She was a symbol of quiet strength. As she refilled a glass at a nearby table, she caught the eyes of a few guests who offered respectful smiles. Some whispered among themselves, inspired by the dignity she had shown. The moment when she had spoken those words to Preston Hale lingered like an unshakable echo. You must be exhausted carrying that much hate into every room. No raised voice, no explosive confrontation. Just a simple truth that spoke louder than any argument could. It was a message of resilience, a reminder that integrity cannot be bought or broken. Back in the kitchen, Darren placed a reassuring hand on Nia's shoulder. You reminded us all why we do this job. Not just to serve food, but to uphold respect and kindness, he said. His words were heartfelt, a testament to the impact of one person's courage. Nia smiled quietly. She knew the road ahead would still have its challenges. Life was not always fair, and some people carried their bitterness like armor. But tonight she had changed the story in this room. She had shown that true power lies in calm resolve, in standing tall without losing oneself. The evening wound down, and the last guests departed with nods of approval. Nia wiped down her station, her heart steady and proud. She had faced an unjust storm and emerged not only unbroken but stronger. In the end, it was not wealth or status that shaped the night. It was the strength of one voice, one person standing firm in her truth. That kind of power leaves a mark no riches can erase.